Hey everyone, welcome to the Path of Me. I'm your host, Wendy Hutchinson, and I have Stephen with me today. Barrett is his last name. Welcome, Stephen. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show with me today, have a soul-to-soul conversation. I appreciate you.
Mm, Appreciate you too. Thanks for inviting me. It's always good to talk to you. And now we're having a broader conversation where other people can listen in what we actually talk about when we talk together alone.
Our soul-to-soul conversations are so good, and some
Yeah.
we just go places, and I just wanted to share some of that on the podcast because we cover so
Mm,
many different topics in the course of our conversations. We were just talking
yes.
before we clicked record about how your journey wasn't what you expected. So you want to share that?
Well, I was allowing things to come up, just seeing what came up to me when you asked me to come on. Like, what would be the focus? So I didn't get a clear answer, but did occur to me that my journey has been long. I've been it was in my mid-20s basically. I started becoming introduced to spirituality, and initially it was quite a rush. A lot of things happened all at once, mystical experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it wasn't. But that journey just seemed to continue. There was never this like one time where, the light came in and my ego dissolved and all was good with the world and I loved everybody and everything. Now it's been a long, slow journey to get there, and I feel like I am starting to get to that point. Intermittently, it's still, I don't want to say a challenge or hard, because that implies that somehow it's actually hard to get back to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, in one realm, in a certain aspect it is, and in another way, it's the easiest thing. Um, but it seems like it's become easier. It's getting easier to feel that sense of love. Even that word, I struggled with that word even from the beginning of my journey in spirituality. I didn't quite know what it was because, of course, ego can't really experience love.
True.
It can experience an awful lot of pop song love, which is there's suffering right on the other side of that, intense suffering usually, because ego's looking for something that it just can't, this doesn't exist with this salvation in another person.
Right.
um Even back then, at some point I was like, wow, why doesn't it just happen for me? When is this shift going to happen? And I thought it was going to be like quick. And but another part of me, there was a truth that came in at some point, and was just the realization, well, at least for my journey, that's not going to happen. And maybe that's the way it needs to be, because maybe that's how I reach more people when it, it- by going through the tougher, like day to day. Um, Again, I don't want to use the wrong words. It's not a battle, but it's a progression, which, if you're trapped in ego, seems endless. And as you shift back into, awareness and love, it seems so simple and timeless. But it's still a journey that many people I think are struggle with, because there's not too many people that have like an Eckhart Tolle experience where
Right.
he asks the question one night and wakes up pretty much awakened the
Awake.
next morning.
Right.
Although he had his own journey.
Of course.
It took him years before he started teaching people,
I think
because he
it's
didn't know how to express what he experienced.
right.
And it was quite a journey for him to find that out too. So,
Right. So many people have expectations of how it's supposed to go, but there are so many different paths up the mountain, honestly, and everyone
mm,
has their own unique experience. I know for me, I had to work so hard to unwind all the programming and all of the unconscious behaviors and thoughts and responses to my life. Or I should say reactions, because when you're unhealed, we're just reacting, right? Something triggers us and we just react. And it
Yeah.
took me so long to unravel the power of my ego over myself.
Mm.
And it was such a humbling journey. I mean, like, there
Yeah.
it is again. There it is again. Oh my God, I
Right.
thought I healed that. And then that issue or that feeling would come up again, and I would be so mad. I mean, I knew it was for me. I mean, I got to a place, obviously, where I could recognize the triggers and understand this was for me and for my growth, but it would just annoy me and make me so angry that I hadn't mastered myself, you know?
Right.
I was
Yeah,
very,
and that's so interesting, right? Because that's part of your ego, mad at part of your ego.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
What shifted for you? When did you kind of accept the path and the journey and start to really just understand the emotional triggers and the external events were working to help you and process and move forward on your journey versus reacting?
Yeah. I think that speaks to this difference between intellectual understanding and a real knowingness, which is, a real understanding of an inner truth that goes beyond anything you could express. So intellectually, I think I've understood it for a long time. I have a fairly good basis. I did a lot of reading and I experimented, meditation, groups, healings, all kinds of things that I tried.
Mhm.
I think the understanding has been there for a long time. But the implementation has not always been as easy to access, and it's been almost fits and starts where I would make quite a shift, but then somehow, kind of like what you alluded to, the ego would come back in,
Mhm.
and the seemingly progress that I had made would appear to kind of reverse itself. Um, but even with that said, overall, when I look back over the span of my life, and we're talking again 30, 35 years, once I started to really um, try to understand, like, what are we looking for? Like, who am I? Ultimately,
That's $1 million question, right?
right. What is this? It's a body, but there's an awareness, there's a consciousness. And what is that? And then trying to understand it with my mind, of course, which will never work. It will never understand it. It can't, because it's not a thing that it can grasp. But coming into more and more just that, a conscious awareness, and in that shifting into finally actually feeling love, where for so long love was I felt removed. I was distant from love. I didn't quite get it. It's like, oh yeah, I like this person, or I like doing that, but this deep sense of connection, and that's really what it comes down to, right? Is love is this connection. And my wife came up with a beautiful definition of love, and she's been like the greatest catalyst in my life, bar none,
Right. Always.
until a teenage boy showed up. So that was like the second level,
Right. Well, they're like, you mastered this partnership thing. Now we're going to put a plot twist in and give you
right?
something that's going to elevate you more, challenge you a little bit. So
Right.
you are.
And the definition she came up with at some point was unconditional acceptance with gratitude.
It's huge.
And yeah, that's so beautiful, because that encompasses an awful lot. Again, love, maybe you can't define it, wholly in a verbal way, in an intellectual way, but it inches closer to that. So I've begun to experience that in various ways more and more in my life. And with that experience, it's interesting how life starts to open up more and more.
Right.
And a definition for ego came to me long ago. It was that which keeps me separate.
Hmm.
And looking back, or still experiencing ego, I could see that there's such a difference. When he shifted to ego, it's this, there's some sort of judgment, and then there's this separation from whatever you're judging. And it could even be internally, you're judging yourself.
Right.
So it's like you're either walling off something that you believe is external, which actually isn't. It's just your belief about the external.
Well, the
So the
external is
wall is,
always a reflection for us, right? For the
yeah,
internal. So there's nothing that's not about us that we're
right,
experiencing in our lives. It's always a mirror for us to actually
right,
go deeper and explore why this was such a trigger, or where is control and fear showing up. That's a question like
right.
I ask, am I if I observe, if I become an observer, if I am an observer of this, what is the role I'm supposed to play here? What am I feeling right now? Are these feelings mine? A lot of times we're in an experience, and you and I are both very compassionate and caring in our work. Stephen is a hospice nurse, which I think is such a noble profession. And of course, I work with the soul. I'm a quantum soul healer. So in our work, we are gifted the opportunity to really show up with incredible compassion and kindness for others. But there are situations where people are relating to us or projecting on us their wounds. And I've found for myself, I need to be very mindful of, okay, I'm feeling things. Is this mine, or is this just someone projecting their wounds on me? Is this mine to take on, or do I need to give this back and say doesn't belong to me? And I think that's a really powerful moment when you can start to discern that, because as empathic people and spiritually gifted people, we tend to, the old way was you just absorb everybody's stuff and transmute it, right? You take it on. But I think the discernment has really helped me go forward in my path around what's mine and what is not mine.
Yeah, I can see how that would it can help keep you clear
Yeah.
and help bring you back into presence. Because if you're trying to deal with it like, oh, I got to deal with this now,
Hmm.
um, it's taking you out of that moment. It's taking you out of that
Right.
experience of compassion for the other person. And
Yes.
again, that, like that definition, that was keep me separate. So if you identify with that aspect, it starts to separate you from that other person, and maybe there's part of your ego that starts to feel like a victim. Why is this happening? All the thoughts that might go along with that. So yeah, that is absolutely a powerful tool that has to be learned for each individual. And eventually, hopefully you get to the point, and it sounds like you certainly have that discernment comes, quicker and easier. And yeah, that's the gift because it allows you to be that compassionate, loving space.
So much of this is a process. It's an incremental process. And we need to be really compassionate and kind towards ourselves through it, because I know I went through this period of thinking mastery looks like perfection, because I had
Mm,
perfectionist tendencies. So that would be an organic and natural direction I would go, like, oh, I need to engage in all these practices, and it has to look this way, and it's got to unfold this way. And I mean, all of that was ego, right? None of that was the true nature of this journey, but it was obviously to get me to look deeper within myself and understand how much I was trying to control the process. Like, oh, if I go to yoga 3 times a week, okay, now I'm gonna just gonna meditate every day, and that's gonna be the answer. And then, you know, it really wasn't, it was a stepping stone, it was a tool, but it really wasn't the answer. The answer was always just to lean into myself and trust myself and know my truths and believe the downloads I was getting were aligned and true for me, and also even filtering external information coming in was something I had to really learn discernment about. Because especially when you belong to a group or something, there's a part of me, and I think a lot of people that want to belong to something greater than themselves. And that was important for me, right?
Yeah.
And then, but if that group begins demanding you follow their narrative and you step away from what your core truths and knowings are, then you start to sacrifice parts of yourself to belong. And I realized that belonging to myself and knowing myself was more valuable than belonging to an organization or a relationship or a friendship that required me to sacrifice parts of who I am and not be authentic.
Yeah, and then just when you said that, of course, that's the search, right? We're all searching for something greater than ourselves. That is actually, so the phrase came up to me when you said that, you are that which is greater than yourself. You
Exactly.
are that.
Exactly.
Right? So
Just
we
like we
spend the
all
whole
go
time,
through, the
look,
wanting to
yeah,
belong, we have to get
it's
through.
like you're right here. You don't
Exactly.
have to search. But
Exactly.
but it's the skill, I guess, that we have to relearn, turning ourselves, turning our vision, our inward sight it back into ourselves to realize that and
Mhm.
then undo the beliefs that don't know that. That's part of the ego that doesn't know that, forgot that, and is on that continual search for that big group. And then ultimately, what is that group? It's yourself, it's you as this aspect of God that you're playing out on this planet.
Right. Right.
What greater group could you belong to? I don't
Right.
think there's a group above that.
I think part of it too is really, like you're just saying, is understanding that we are source energy. We are
Mm,
soul. We are, God, not in the religious interpretation of God, but the frequency of love,
yeah,
the purity of love. And circling back to your speaking about how love has changed and deepened for you in your relationship, I feel like as you guys are loving yourselves more and in more connection within yourself, it increases your capacity to meet each other from that space and not from a space of you need to complete me or you need to be something I need you to be. Because as we
yeah,
become more whole and complete within ourselves, then we can meet someone without agenda or expectation. We're already whole and complete. So it must really change the dynamic of the relationship as you transition through that.
yeah. Another phrase I thought of some time ago, but it occurs to me while you're saying that is love needs no defense.
Right.
So if there's so just think of this. If you truly know there's nothing in you or about you that you need to defend, like
Mhm.
what conflict can take place?
Right.
I
Right.
mean, there someone else could have the idea that they need to have conflict with you, but if you don't need the defense, you're not trying to defend the idea of yourself, no conflict happens, at least for your internal well-being. You can
Right.
still be in your heart. And
Right.
maybe you know, things happen not coincidentally, right? No coincidences. But yesterday, I had two occasions where people sort of got aggressive with me.
Oh,
I was not physically, but I'm driving and I went by this car and he was closing the door. Maybe he thought I was trying to rush him. I really wasn't. I was
oh,
just like, and I kind of waved to him, and maybe he thought I was gesturing
oh my goodness.
negatively. So
Oh
he
my,
flipped me the bird,
oh
and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting."
my God.
Later later that day, I was coming home. It was night, and this car was like, you know, riding my butt. I was trying to think of a nicer way to say it. I was going to be a little more crude, but so, yeah, and so I was coming to my turnoff and I sort of tapped the brakes a little bit to see if he would back up. I didn't slam him by any means. And then I started to turn off into my lane and he came and like almost sideswiped my car
Oh my
and
gosh.
sped across. And it was interesting
Wow.
that these things occurred because I noticed a little bit of reaction coming in both cases.
Mhm.
I was very just present with it. And I was
Right.
like, okay, let's really be present with this reaction.
Yeah.
And my thoughts would come in a little bit, trying to interpret it or I don't know, judge the other people.
Mm-hmm.
But it fairly quickly shifted, and I just had compassion for both of them.
Oh my God, I was just gonna say that my level of compassion has really changed because I can feel like I can actually feel the wounds of the other person. Like there must be
Yeah,
something going on in them that is making them act this way or show up in this way. I will say I do have compassion with boundaries. If somebody's not
sure,
treating me appropriately, and I can still see the
right,
wound, I can still see the
yeah,
inception point for them of where this is coming from. Also, it's up to me to protect my own inner peace and space and energy, right?
yeah,
So I definitely can still have compassion, even love, but sometimes it has to be from a distance, you know?
sure. And that's sometimes the misunderstanding of love is that it's only, in some ways, it is only giving, but also there's becomes to be a wisdom in what you do. And like you said, honoring yourself and honoring your space um, appropriately. And sometimes that is putting a hard line on somebody, but
Hmm.
you're doing it, but there's a difference. There's a total different energy. If you're doing it through love and compassion, even though your words may be a little bit loud or from the outside looking in, maybe they seem harsh, but there's a different quality to it, and there's an different inner quality. The inner quality is not agitated. I have to make this person do this or that or the other thing for me to be happy, um, in this great anger. But it's like this is actually appropriate for both of us.
Of course.
Um,
Yeah.
and I'm not, and again, you're not trying to manipulate them. You're just saying, no, this
Right.
isn't,
There's just
this
that
shouldn't
boundary
happen.
in line. Like, this is not respectful. This is not
Yeah,
honoring of who I am. And I'm going to remove myself from this dynamic,
sure.
basically. I think boundaries are a big part of this process,
Yeah,
is bringing our energy back into ourselves, honoring ourselves, even the energy we use to relate to ourselves. Like, we must always show love and compassion for ourselves in our thoughts, in our actions, and in our being. It's so important that we create a very, very strong foundation within ourselves around who we are and honoring who we are in all of our weirdness and glory. We are all so unique, and society, family dynamics, cultural dynamics have such a way of pushing us into spaces and boxes that we just don't belong in. And so we're trying to unwind all of this programming where we've edited out pieces of us to fit and into these boxes, whether it's to
mm,
be an academic or to be financially or professionally successful, or to look a certain way, or to believe a certain thing, or to, the belonging, make others happy at our expense. There's so many programs that we have been working. Well, I know you and I have been working very hard to unravel and unwind, to return to our true selves and love ourselves through that process. And it's been a
Right.
difficult journey. It's been very, like I said, humbling to recognize my patterns and who I've been. And I think a part of the healing too is making peace with an acceptance of just what different versions of you were, just honoring
Yeah.
that moved me forward here, that moved me forward here,
Mm.
and then to be able to just really understand that every single version of us was necessary to get here.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that the way you say that because yeah, it's almost where it's the same being. We've had, it's there's a continuum of experience, but you could almost say there's a different version of yourself that you can love or not love. And if you
Mhm.
condemn that version of yourself, again, what is love, right? There's a sense of wholeness to it, right? There's no separation. So you have the inner wholeness or external wholeness. If I'm in the world and somehow thinking it's a harsh, this is my thought and my belief, it's a harsh, horrible place, and I'm disconnected from it. First of all, just on the basic physics of it, on a body level, it's so untrue. We're breathing in the air, we're exchanging oxygen, carbon dioxide, and gases and food. It's a constant exchange, it's a constant cooperation. We cannot help but be completely enmeshed in what is here. So there is no separation, even on
Right.
that very basics intellectual level. But then there's that internal separation, like you said. And if you're judging that aspect of you, it's totally not separate from you. It is part of you. That is now with the judgment, it can never be free. That part of you, that energy,
That's
it's
a huge,
waiting for you
that's a
to open
huge
the
thing.
door.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's waiting for you to open the door and set that part of you free.
Hmm.
And only you can do it. You're the only one that is in charge or knows or is connected to this inner self. Of
Yes.
course, it broadens out. It's part of God, but it's almost like, well, God said this is your part.
You have to play a
This is
part
your
here.
Yeah, this is your responsibility.
Yeah.
Only you can free yourself.
Right.
So if you can give love to those versions of yourself, and what does it come up with? How does it come up? It comes up in various ways. Maybe you actually see that version of yourself doing something and you verbally say, um, or internally that you forgive, and you can uh, create imagery where you're seeing that version of yourself and you're sending love. So there's that, but it also comes up in all the negative emotions that you are feeling. Those are the patterns from the past. Those are the past versions of yourself coming into the present to be healed. And if you that so you maybe you don't have a full idea of where that comes from, but it doesn't matter. If you can bring that compassion and love, and that stillness, maybe that's another word for love is
Mhm.
inner stillness. If you can bring it to that part of you that's appearing this moment, you're forgiving yourself right in that moment. You're forgiving yourself and you're allowing that part of you to be free, that energy to reintegrate.
It's huge, right? When we can offer that to ourselves. But also, I know for a lot of people, leaving the comfort zone, as unhealthy as it is for their mind, body, and soul, is so challenging because people crave comfort and security. And
Yeah,
as we go through this constant evolution of ourselves through this human experience, there is such a strong desire to hold on. People hold
Yeah.
on so tightly to things that aren't aligned. I was guilty of that too. I've held on to people
Mm,
too long and friendships too long and um, family pattern, control patterns I held on for so long that I had to let go of. But I want to encourage people to have the bravery and courage to let go, because in the holding on, you chain yourself to those unhealthy things, to
yeah.
those things that are holding you back and creating density and drag on you energetically.
Yeah.
And until you're willing to just open your hands and release it, you're going to be tethered like that hot air
Yeah.
balloon that wants to take off, but it's tied down. You're literally tying
Mm,
yourself down to these partnerships or these career choices or these um, coping mechanisms, you know, and we need to be mindful of that because
yeah.
these spiritual concepts, Stephen, we talk about, they're so simple, but to
Right.
live and embody them, it requires so much mastery. It's so challenging, to actually
Mm,
put these things, like you're saying, to actually become them and express them through
yeah.
your life. It's challenging,
Yeah.
you know.
It's definitely challenging, but absolutely not impossible. But
Right.
there needs to be some interest to do it. And if you are so wrapped up in the identity of who you are, so if you're angry and you say, I am angry at you, you are saying that you're claiming it, you're owning it, and you're actually reaching out. Like you said, the opposite is just letting go. You're actually reaching out and you're holding that because
Mhm.
around that anger is, basically there's this fear because you have an identity that's being threatened. So you need to use that anger to
Right.
unthreaten and manipulate the outside world. So for this second or day or whatever, you feel a little safer, and that's what you're hanging on to. And just to let go. So part of that is so the anger comes up. Can you be present in your body and use some tools? There's so many tools to learn that are out there and available, but connecting with your breath, connecting with the actual energy sense of who you are. You can feel it, you're just turning that awareness in there. So you're gotta anchor back into this present moment and knowing that you're feeling this anger. But of course, you're feeling the anger. It's not you. And you're offering it space, a moment. It just needs that attention to start to unwind and to release. So yes, it can take some time to unwind this patterns that have built in not just this life, but maybe many other lives.
Mhm.
But this is the time to do it. There is no other now,
Right. I
right?
mean, if
You
not
have
now,
to
when? If not now, when? I always
exactly
say, right? Like, let's
right,
just confront this and really sit with this.
right.
People distract themselves a lot because if they don't create space, they don't have to see it. If they don't have to see it, they don't have to know it. If they don't have to know it, they don't have to do something about it. So let's just be busy.
Or feel it,
Yeah, or
feel it,
feel it.
right?
Yeah, let's just be chronically busy and not honor ourselves with space.
Yeah. Well, we get so programmed by an early age that really what we're trying to outrun the present moment, like constantly,
Hmm.
like finding distractions in
Yeah.
ways not to actually be. And so that is who you are. You are a being existing now in this moment. And also, we're looking for that connection with other groups or even with God through religion. But nobody, but usually we're trying to find it like we're going to do this, that, and the other thing so that we discover this sometime down the road. Heaven is after I die. It can't possibly be here. Um, so in that it, so we're actually always trying to avoid the absolute reality of existence, which is this moment.
Right.
So how, of course, there's just such a deep um, misunderstanding of what's going on here.
The
Yeah.
irony is this moment is your power center. It's this moment and you
Yes,
living in the moment and being present to the moment, which is your most powerful tool to
right. It,
create and express. And I found that I can draw a moment of experience out, like bend time when I'm very present because I'm in it fully,
right.
like with my granddaughter, for example, or something.
Mm,
It's so easy just to take care of her and not be super present, right? But I find there's so much joy when I'm just sitting very present, and whether she's behaving or not behaving or whatever is happening, and to be fully present to the moment also allows me to be respond to everything from my highest because I'm
yeah.
fully here.
Yeah, and you can even expand it. You see, yes, you're being present and you're accessing those parts of yourself, but what are you accessing? Because again, we are not separate from this entire creation. There's no there, yes, there is something there that says there's an I, there's an I consciousness, but again, it's connected to all of
Mm-hmm.
the rest of the I consciousness, the greater. So you're not just accessing it's not like you're accessing this personal power, which of course is an ego idea. You're accessing universal intelligence, universal power, universal creativity. So you're tapping into that which you already are, which is so much beyond who you think you are.
Exactly.
And and it doesn't have to be some gigantic Einstein idea. It can be being totally present with your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for me, interacting with my family, and as you mentioned, I'm a hospice nurse. Sometimes I'm just there with the patients, and they're not necessarily conscious. They're not responding to me, but I'm holding their hand, and there's just such beauty there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've noticed that too, like l- re- recently, or more so, at least more so I've noticed, I'm just walking down the hall, in a facility where I'm going and seeing people interact and nothing special. It's not like somebody's doing some great kindness to another. They're just talking. And I'm like, my God, and I'm getting choked up just thinking about it. I'm like, God, my God, how beautiful these people are.
Well, I have those moments too where I observe. I was sitting in a coffee shop where I go all the time.
Mm,
And I was sitting on a couch with my coffee, and people were walking up to the counter, and I found myself going, wow, how beautiful she is. And she wasn't like
mm,
a model, maybe heavy wit set, but in her yoga pants. I was just like seeing how beautiful each human, they all were so different, but and unique, but I was just like, wow, look at that guy. Look at him and his dog, and look at him and his baby. I was just like, my heart was like cracking open. And I was thinking to myself, who am I? Like, what is going on right now? It's like, wow, every single person that came in that day, I was just like, what a beautiful human being. It's just marveling at each person.
yeah,
And I felt so open-hearted, and to have that instead of the converse, which is the judgment, like, oh, look at that outfit, or, you know, who are they trying to prove? What are they trying to prove, or whatever? It was just such a different experience, similar to yours, when
yeah,
you just see other people interacting, and you're like, wow, how beautiful is that?
right. Yeah, and like you said, open-hearted, it's so connected to that. And I think it, metaphysically, physically it is. apparently the heart, is the greatest source. It has the biggest field around us, much more powerful than our brain.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you connect with that practically? And I've been noticing that just bringing your my awareness to that space,
Mm-hmm.
in stillness. At the same time, my awareness is spread, but maybe not focused on the outside or another person, but it's here. And by bringing my attention there over and over again, so that's just like another tool to use, breathing and actually feeling that heart, because it has to be more than just a metaphor. You know, oh, she like a person wears their heart on their sleeve, or have to have a heart to heart conversation. All these phrases are about the core you interacting with the world. And so I think that's why I don't know other languages if they do so, but at least in English, um, that's what it speaks to when we use these phrases about the heart. So I think it's metaphorical, but there's an also physical, metaphysical reality to this space here. And it's bringing your attention back into this, so you can bring your attention into the body to be more present. Because if you're totally in thoughts, your body is so far out of your awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and you just sort of notices on the periphery. But when you start, so the shift is coming back away from the thoughts into the body. And where do you bring your attention? So one practice is actually breathing, bringing it into this space, and maybe actually intending for it to be more open, and allowing more love in more love to be expressed in the world. So yeah, sometimes we have to find these tangible practices, to bring the spirituality into fruition.
Also, we have to
And
be so conscious all the time, like you're saying,
mm,
to even be conscious to do it, to bring these practices in and to
yes,
make mindfulness part of our everyday life. And I really want to touch on something that I've been noticing. This is a daily journey and practice. And a lot of people feel like if they just go to this retreat on the weekend and
yeah,
experience this great connection and stuff and then come back, they're going to find enlightenment. And
right,
this is not a weekend warrior experience. This is a daily practice of connecting to yourself.
mm,
And I think it's almost like you could read these higher principles from all of these masters, you know. You could memorize them all. You could memorize the Bible. You could memorize these teachings. But it's really important that we embody them in our everyday life if we are going to continue to, just reiterating or reposting or saying these phrases that are enlightened or whatever is far different from embodying and living it.
right. And it's a journey, because maybe before we were telling ourselves all these negative things about ourselves or about the world. But so then we learn, okay, so I don't want to create that anymore. So I'll start repeating mantras constantly, or saying more positive things about myself. And that's important too. But then there's another shift where you shift out of constantly needing to say that, and maybe the mind actually start to quiet down because you are being more present, and then into the practice of just being present, just being conscious, like you said, aware of what's around you, without comment, without the constant dialogue. And that's the trick, right? So
Mm.
earlier in my life, it just never shut the hell up. Like it was constant. And I know other teachers have used this sort of metaphor, but it's not even a metaphor. It's actually true reality. If you go down the street and you see somebody, maybe homeless or maybe not, well dressed, but they're all now it's actually harder to distinguish because everybody has a little earphone, and they're actually talking loud, but they are talking to somebody else. But somebody walking down the street and talking to somebody and yelling, and there's nobody there. So, and we think, oh, that poor person is so crazy. Look at them, they're so delusional. But then we pass them, and then we're thinking about tomorrow, or we're thinking about what happened yesterday as we're walking along. So we're just not verbalizing that we're doing the exact same thing as that other person. And that shift away from that constant chatter into just the space of this moment
Mhm.
um, it is a challenge, and it's a process, like you said, to start to unwind and to habitually. At some point, you have to want to do it, and at some point, you have to start to know somewhere that what's here in this moment is so much more interesting than what my mind is thinking about. It's so much more joy there. There's so much more experience. There's life there. And I had another statement for a while that came to me, and it was the trouble with God is when you think about him or talk about him, he disappears. So the point being with that is you can conceptualize God, think about God, what you should do about God all day long, but you can never experience him if you're wrapped, that's your focus.
Yes,
You
yes,
can only do it now, this moment.
exactly. And
And
in
that's the
feeling,
challenge.
and feeling, not thinking. It's a feeling, it's a frequency, it's a vibration. It's not a thought.
Yeah.
It's a actual feeling of connection. And every single person has that divine spark within them. Every single soul
Yeah.
is has a light body and frequency and energy, and our personal choices really matter in how much we amplify or expand our consciousness and grow, or how much we dim and contract and don't, choose a different experience here.
Yeah.
So it's very much a personal choice and a conscious one for those of us who are interested in being in higher service to others. I feel we're just about out of time. That went so quick, Stephen. I
It did.
would, but do you have any final words of wisdom to share for people who are maybe struggling a little bit as they're navigating and very attached to what's unraveling in front of them? Life is happening and it's just so difficult and they're feeling overwhelmed. And do you have anything you would offer here to those people?
I guess, what comes to me is just you cannot help but be connected with the magnificence of who you are and of God. And, your life is not there as your great tormentor. It's there actually, whatever's presenting that moment is a God, is a gift from yourself actually, and or God. You're giving it to yourself.
Mhm,
And there's always that opportunity of redemption every single moment. And it
mhm.
may not be that redemption of I'm healed, but that moment, if you bring your awareness in your heart to that moment, there's redemption is always available.
That is so beautiful. I almost cried. That was so beautifully said, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today. I
No,
always love
thank you, Wendy.
talking to you and
Mm,
to my audience. I hope you got some pearls of wisdom from Stephen. He's such a master and an incredible guide and friend to me. And I hope you go out and live your best life. Love yourselves, be kind to yourselves. And we'll talk to you all later. Bye.
thank you, Wendy. Bye.